You guys, this next chapter, I don't really know how to pronounce it. Ailuromancy, maybe, but I did just look it up, and it means the use of kittens to tell the future or something like that. I know why it's called that, and you'll find out in just a few minutes. But this is a part in the story where we're going back to Bailey. Remember, Bailey's at the circus right now, and he just left Isabel's tent. She read his future for him. She said it was going to be a lot of movement, maybe some adventure and travel. But she also figured out at the end of that chapter that he was there looking for Poppet. And I don't know if you remember, but she tells him to turn right when he gets out of the tent. Okay, so let's see how Bailey's circus experience goes. Leaving the fortune teller's tent and heading right, as she had suggested, Bailey almost immediately encounters a small crowd watching a performance. He cannot tell what it is at first. There is no raised platform involved. Peering through the space between spectators, he can see a hoop, larger than the one the contortionist used, held in the air. As he moves closer, he glimpses a black kitten leaping through it, landing somewhere out of sight. A woman in front of him with a large hat turns, and then he can see a young man about his own age, but a bit shorter, dressed in a black suit made of all manner of fabrics and a matching black hat. On his shoulders sits a pair of stark white kittens. As he lifts his black gloved hand, palm open, one of the kittens jumps into it and bounces off his palm, leaping through the hoop, executing a rather impressive somersault at the pinnacle of its leap. Several members of the small audience laugh, and a few, including Bailey, applaud. The woman in the large hat steps aside, completely clearing Bailey's line of sight. His hands freeze in mid-clap when he sees the young lady who has just caught the white kitten and is now lifting it to her shoulder where it sits along with the black kitten. I bet you already figured out who this is. Okay, so remember when we were backstage and we got to see Poppet and Widget's room? And it was really bright and colorful, but there were also a ton of kittens in there, some really, really dark black, some snow white. Okay, so actually, Poppet and Widget do have a function in the circus. They don't, it's not like they're just there to wander around. They actually have their own performance that they do. And their performance is one where they have kittens that do different tricks. Okay, so I want to guess that the black kittens belong to Widget and the white kittens belong to Poppet. And they've trained these kittens to do magical things like jump through a hoop or do a somersault. But this is also super exciting because we know that Bailey has just laid eyes on Poppet for the second time. She is older as he expected, and her red hair is somehow concealed within a white cap. But her costume is similar to the one she had been wearing when he last saw her, a patchwork dress of every fabric imaginable, each in tones of snowy white, a white jacket with lots of buttons, and a pair of bright white gloves. She turns her head. Bailey catches her eye, and she smiles at him. Not in the way that one smiles at a random member of the audience when one is in the middle of performing circus tricks with unusually talented kittens, but in the way that one smiles when one recognizes someone they have not seen. Bailey can tell the difference, and the fact that she remembers who he is makes him inexplicably and utterly pleased. He feels his ears getting rather hot despite the cold of the night air. He watches the rest of the act with rapt attention, paying a fair deal more attention to the girl than the kittens, though the kittens are too impressive to ignore, as they steal his attention back periodically. When the act is finished, the girl and boy and kittens take a short bow, and the crowd claps and hoots. Okay, so Poppet catches his eye in the middle of the performance, and she remembers him. He can tell, like by the way she smiles at him, that she remembers who he is. This is amazing. Bailey is wondering what he should say, if he should say anything, as the crowd begins to disperse. A man pushes in front of him, another woman blocks his way to the side, and he loses sight of the girl completely. He pushes through the throng of people, and when he is free of them, the girl and the boy and the kittens are nowhere to be seen. The crowd around him quickly dwindles to only a few people wandering up and down the pathway. There are no other directions to go as far as he can tell. Only striped walls of tents line the area, and he turns around slowly, looking for any possible place they might have disappeared to, some corner or door. He is kicking himself for coming so close only to fail when there is a tap on his shoulder. "Hello, Bailey," the girl says. She is standing right behind him. She has taken off her hat, her red hair falling in waves around her shoulders, and she has replaced her white jacket with a heavy black coat and a knit scarf in a vibrant violet. Only the ruffled hem of her dress and her white boots give any indication that she is the same girl who was performing in the same spot moments ago. Otherwise, she looks like any other patron in the circus. Okay, remember when Bailey snuck into the circus that one time and she said his name as he was leaving and he realizes he never told her his name? Okay, now we see they're finally face to face and she remembers his name and she calls him Bailey. She has also changed clothes. She's wearing way different clothing, and this actually is like just by changing her clothing so she's not wearing all white makes her kind of blend into the crowd, and nobody really notices that it's the same person that was just performing with the kittens. "Hello," Bailey says. "I don't know your name." "Oh, I'm sorry," she says. "I forgot that we were never properly introduced." She holds out her white gloved hand, and Bailey notices that it is larger than the glove he was given as proof of her long ago dare. "I'm Penelope, but no one ever calls me that, and I don't really like it anyway. So, for all intents and purposes, my name is Poppet." Bailey takes her hand and shakes it. It is warmer than he expected, even through 2 layers of glove. "Poppet," Bailey repeats. "The fortune teller told me that, but I didn't realize it was your name." The girl smiles at him. "You saw Isabel?" she asks. Bailey nods. "Isn't she lovely?" Bailey continues to nod, though he's not sure nodding is an appropriate response. "Did she tell you anything good about your future?" Poppet asks, lowering her voice to a dramatic whisper. "She told me a lot of things I didn't understand," Bailey confesses. Poppet nods knowingly. "She does that," Poppet says, "but she means well." "Are you allowed to be out here like this?" Bailey asks, indicating the steady stream of circus patrons that continues to wander by, completely ignoring them. "Oh, yes," Poppet says, "as long as we're incognito." She indicates her coat. "No one really gives us a second glance, right, Widget?" She turns to a young man standing nearby who Bailey had not even recognized as Poppet's performance partner. He has switched his black jacket for a tweedy brown one, and his hair under his matching cap is just as shockingly red as Poppet's. "People don't pay much attention to anything unless you give them a reason to," he says. "Though the hair helps too for looking like we don't belong in a black and white circus." "Bailey, this is my brother Winston," Poppet says. "Widget," he corrects. "I was getting to that," Poppet says, sounding a bit cross. "And Widge, this is Bailey." "Pleased to meet you," Bailey says, offering his hand. "Likewise," Widget responds in turn. "We were off for a walk if you'd like to join us." "Do come, please," Poppet asks. "We hardly ever have company." That reminds me, do you remember when Poppet, it was in the Wizard in the Tree chapter, and Poppet was sitting with Widget, and she told him about that one thing that she saw in the stars where it was like super chaotic and there was fire and there was blood on the ground. And then she also said, "Oh, and we're going to have a visitor." Remember that? So she's saying right now, like, he's the visitor. Now, that was years ago when she had that premonition. So she's been waiting for a long time for Bailey to show up. "Sure, I'd like that," Bailey says. He cannot think of a single reason to refuse, and is pleased that they both seem remarkably easy to talk to. "Do you not have to do any more circus things?" "Not for a few hours at least," Widget says, as they start off down another pathway through the circus. "The kittens need to nap." Performing makes them sleepy. They're very good. How do you make them do all those tricks? I've never seen a cat do a somersault in midair, Bailey says. He notices that all three of them are walking at the same pace, staying easily together as a group. He is much more used to following a few steps behind. Okay, so for the first time in what he can remember, Bailey is walking with friends who want to walk right beside him. Remember, he was so used to being around Caroline and her friends, and how, like, Caroline would always make him be at the bottom of the tree and she was always mean to him. This is like a place where he actually fits in and they want him around. And so it feels really good to Bailey. He likes it. Most cats will do anything if you ask them nicely, Poppet says, but it helps to train them early. And to give them lots of treats, Widget adds. Treats always help. Have you seen the big cats? Poppet asks. Bailey shakes his head. Oh, you should. Our parents do the big cat show. Their tent is right down that way. She points in a direction vaguely to the right. It's like our performance, only with bigger cats, Widget says. Much bigger cats, Poppet elaborates. Panthers and beautiful spotted snow leopards. They're sweet, really. And they have a tent, Widget adds. Why don't you have a tent? Bailey asks. We don't really need one, Poppet says. We can only do a few shows a night, and all we need are the kittens and hoops and strings and things. Anyone who doesn't really need a tent performs wherever there's room. It adds to the ambiance, Widget says. So you can see bits of the circus without having to pick a tent to go into, just wandering around. That's probably very good for indecisive people, Bailey says, smiling when Poppet and Widget both laugh. It is hard to choose a tent, you know, when there are so many. That's true, Poppet says. They've reached the bonfire courtyard. It is quite crowded, and Bailey is still surprised that no one pays them much attention, assuming that they are just the same as any other group of young circus patrons visiting for the evening. I'm hungry, Widget says. You're always hungry, Poppet retorts. Shall we get something to eat? Yes, Widget says. Poppet sticks her tongue out at him. I was asking Bailey, she says. Shall we get something to eat, Bailey? Sure, Bailey says. Poppet and Widget seem to get along much better than he and Caroline ever have, and he assumes it is because they are closer to the same age. He wonders if they are twins. They certainly look enough alike to be twins, and he thinks it might be rude to ask. Have you tried the cinnamon things? Poppet asks. They're rather new. What are they called, Widge? Fantastically delicious cinnamon things, Widget says, shrugging. I don't think all of the new things have names yet. I haven't, but they sound good, Bailey says. They are good, Widget says. Layers of pastry and cinnamon and sugar all rolled into a twist and covered in icing. Wow, Bailey says. Exactly, Widget replies. And we should get some cocoa and some chocolate mice. I have chocolate mice, Bailey says, pulling the bag out of his pocket. I bought them earlier. All right, you guys, my battery is running low. Let me run downstairs and plug it in, and then I will pick right up where I left off. All right, let's keep going. I don't want to have to start the whole chapter over again. Okay, so Bailey, they're going to get food, and Bailey's like, don't worry, I got the chocolate mice. See, he fits right in. You think ahead. Very good to be prepared, Widget says. You were right about him, Poppet. Bailey looks at Poppet quizzically, but she only smiles at him. Okay, that proves right there the Poppet was talking about Bailey. Okay, so of course Bailey is like very pleased to hear that she told her brother about him. Shall Bailey and I get cocoa while you get the cinnamon whatnots? She asks, and Widget nods his approval of this plan. Certainly. Meet you at the bonfire, he asks. Poppet nods, and Widget tips his hat to them both and goes off into the crowd. Bailey and Poppet continue to walk around the bonfire courtyard. After a few moments of amicable silence, Bailey works up the nerve to ask a question. One he's not sure he'll be comfortable asking once they meet back up with Widget. Can I ask you something? Bailey says. Of course, Poppet says. There's a bit of a line for Coco, but the vendor notices Poppet, who flashes 3 fingers at him, and he smiles and nods in return. When the circus was here last time, and Bailey struggles for words, annoyed that the question seems simpler in his head. Yes, Poppet says. How did you know my name? Bailey asks. And how did you know I was there? Poppet says, as though she is having difficulty finding the proper words to respond with. It's not easy to explain, she starts. I see things before they happen. I saw you coming not long before you got there, and I don't always see details well, but when I saw you, I knew what your name was, like knowing that your scarf is blue. They reach the front of the line, and the vendor has 3 cups of cocoa and striped cups waiting for them already, with clouds of extra whipped cream on top. Poppet hands one to Bailey and takes the other 2 herself, and Bailey notices that the vendor waves them off with no money having been changed hands. He assumes that free cocoa is the benefit of being a member of the circus. So, you see everything before it happens? Bailey asks. He's not sure Poppet's answer is entirely what he had expected, if he expected anything at all. Poppet shakes her head. No, not everything. Sometimes just bits of things, like words and pictures in a book. But the book has lots of pages missing, and it's been dropped in a pond, and some parts are blurry, but other parts aren't. Does that make sense? She asks. Not really, Bailey answers. Poppet laughs. I know, it's strange, she says. No, it's not, Bailey says. Poppet turns to look at him, the skepticism at the statement evident on her face. Well, yes, it is kind of strange, but just odd strange, not bad strange. Thank you, Bailey, Poppet says. They circle the courtyard, heading back to the bonfire. Widget is waiting for them, holding a black paper bag and watching the vibrant white flames. What took you so long? Widget asks. We had a line, Poppet says, handing him his cocoa. Didn't you? No, I don't think people have figured out how good these things are yet, Widget says, shaking the bag. Are we set then? I think so, Poppet says. Where are we going? Bailey asks. Poppet and Widget exchange a glance before Poppet answers. We're doing rounds, she says. Circles of the circus. To keep an eye on things. You do want to come with us, don't you? Of course, Bailey says, relieved that he is not an imposition. They walk in loops around the circus, sipping their cocoa and munching on chocolate mice and the sugary cinnamon pastry things, which are just as good as promised. Poppet and Widget tell him stories of the circus, pointing out tents as they pass by, and Bailey answers their questions about his town, finding it strange that they seem interested in what he considers very mundane things. They speak with the ease of people who have known each other for years and the excitement of new friends with new stories. If Poppet and Widget are keeping an eye on anything beyond their cocoa and himself, Bailey cannot tell what it might be. What's the stargazer? He asks, catching sight of a sign he has not seen before, as they discard their empty cups and bags. Up for gazing, Poppet? Widget asks his sister. She pauses before she nods. Poppet reads the stars, he explains to Bailey. It's the easiest place to find the future. It hasn't been all that easy lately, Poppet says quietly. But we can ride. It's only open on clear nights, so who knows if we'll get another chance while we're here. They step inside, joining a line that ascends a curving stairway around the perimeter, separated from the interior of the tent by a heavy black curtain. The walls are covered in diagrams, white spots and lines on paper framed maps of constellations. Is it like the way the fortune teller reads those cards with pictures on them? Bailey asks, still trying to wrap his mind around the idea of seeing the future. Sort of like that, but different, Poppet says. I can't read tarot cards at all, but Widget can. There's stories on paper, Widget says, shrugging. You see how the stories in each card go together. It's not really that hard. But with those, you have all different possibilities and things, different paths to take. Poppet sees things that actually happen. But they're not as clear, Poppet explains. There isn't context, and most of them, I don't know what things mean until later. Sometimes not until it's too late. Disclaimers accepted, Pet, Widget says, giving her a shoulder squeeze. It can just be a ride if you want. At the top of the stairs, they reach a black platform where everything is endlessly dark, save for a circus worker in a white suit who's guiding patrons inside. He smiles at Poppet and Widget with a curious glance at Bailey as he escorts them through the darkness into something like a sleigh or a carriage. They slide onto a cushioned bench with a high back and sides, the door on one side clicking closed as Poppet settles in between Bailey and Widget. It glides forward slowly, and Bailey can see nothing but darkness. Then something around them clicks softly, and the carriage falls just a bit, and at the same time it tilts backward, so they are looking up instead of forward. This tent has no top, Bailey realizes. The upper portion of it is open with the night sky fully visible. It is a different sensation than watching the stars while lying in a field, something Bailey has done many times. There are no trees creeping into the edges, and the gentle swaying of the carriage makes them feel almost weightless. And it is incredibly quiet. As the carriage moves along in what seems to be a circular pattern, Bailey can hear nothing but a soft creak and the sound of Poppet breathing next to him. It is as though the entire circus is faded away into the darkness. He glances over at Poppet, who is looking at him instead of the sky. She gives him a grin and then turns away. Okay, so we see little moments like this, like when Bailey looks at Poppet and she's actually looking at him, or like when Widget's like, you were right about him, Poppet. Okay, that kind of give us a sense that Bailey is really important to Poppet in some way. It's a little soon to call it anything romantic, but it definitely she accepts him and she wants him to hang out with them and go with them all around the circus, and she trusts him too for some reason. So the way the Stargazer works, it's like it reminds. Okay, have you ever been in the Haunted Mansion at Disneyland and you're sitting in those little pods, and you're sitting beside your friend or whatever. Okay, it's kind of like that, and you're moving forward in your pod, and then all of a sudden the pod kind of tilts back so that you're laying facing upward and you're looking at the stars, and that's why it's called the Stargazer. Okay, before they get on the ride, Widget asks Poppet if she wants to read the stars tonight, and she's not really feeling it. She doesn't really want to read the stars because the last time she read the stars, it was that scary vision that she told us about. Okay, but here she is. She looks up to the stars when she gets caught staring at Bailey. Bailey wonders if he should ask if she sees anything in the stars. You don't have to if you don't want to, Widget says, anticipating the question. Poppet turns to make it face at him, but then focuses her gaze upward, looking into the clear night sky. Bailey watches her carefully. She looks as though she's contemplating a painting or reading a sign from far away, squinting just a little. She stops suddenly, putting her hands to her face, pressing her white-gloved fingers over her eyes. Widget puts a hand on her shoulder. Are you all right? Bailey asks. Poppet takes a deep breath before she nods, keeping her hands over her face. I'm fine, she says with a muffled voice. It was very bright. It made my head hurt. She takes her hands from her face and shakes her head. Whatever distress she had been in apparently passed. Okay, so she sees something in the stars that is so bright that it gives her a headache, kind of, and so she's decided that's enough of looking at the stars for tonight. For the remainder of the ride, none of them look up at the star-speckled sky. I'm sorry, Bailey says quietly as they walk down another curving stairway in order to exit. It's not your fault, Poppet says. I should have known better. The stars have been doing that lately, making no sense and giving me headaches. I should probably stop trying for a while. You need some cheering, Widget says, as they return to the din of the circus. Cloud maze? Poppet nods, her shoulders relaxing a bit. What's the cloud maze? Bailey asks. You haven't found any of the best tents yet, have you? Widget says, shaking his head. You're going to have to come back. We can't do all of them in one night. Maybe that's why Pet got a headache. She saw us having to drag you through every single tent to see what you've been missing. Widge can see the past, Poppet says, suddenly diverting the conversation. It's one of the reasons his stories are always so good. The past is easier, Widget says. It's already there. In the stars? Bailey asks. No, Widget says. On people. The past stays on you the way powdered sugar stays on your fingers. Some people can get rid of it, but it's still there, the events and things that push you to where you are now. I can, well, read isn't the right word, but it's not the right word for what Poppet does with the stars either. So you can see my past on me, Bailey asks. I could, Widget says. I try not to do it without permission if there's nothing that jumps out automatically. Do you mind? Bailey shakes his head. Not at all. Widget stares at him for a moment, not quite long enough for Bailey to become uncomfortable under the weight of his eyes, but almost. There's a tree, Widget says. This massive old oak tree that's more home to you than your house, but not as much as this is. He gestures around at the tents and the lights, feeling like you're alone even when you're with other people. Apples. And your sister seems like a real gem, he adds sarcastically. That sounds about right, Bailey says with a laugh. What are the apples? Poppet asks. My family has a farm with an orchard, Bailey explains. Oh, that sounds lovely, Poppet says. Bailey has never considered the rows of short, twisted trees lovely. Here we are, Widget says, as they round a turn. Okay, they're getting ready to go into this tent called the Cloud Maze, but I want to just quickly touch on what Widget was able to see on Bailey. Okay, so the old oak tree is obviously the tree where he reads and where he saw the circus when it arrived and all that good stuff. He talks about his farm and apples, that his sister seems mean and things like that. Okay, so when Bailey goes to explain to Poppet that they have a farm and that it has apples, Poppet thinks it sounds lovely. We know that Bailey thinks the farm is predictable, boring, mundane. But remember that Poppet has been raised in a very busy and chaotic manner by always traveling with the circus. It's kind of like when a girl has curly hair and all she really wants is straight hair. Or a girl who has straight hair, all she really wants is to have beautiful curly hair. You know what I mean? It's kind of like because Poppet doesn't live in such a situation, it sounds appealing to her. Okay, so they're just kind of talking about that. Now, they're going to go into this tent called the Cloud Maze. It's pretty cool. I think you have on your questions to describe the Cloud Maze. So here we go. Despite his limited experience with the circus, Bailey is amazed that he has never seen this tent before. It is tall, almost as tall as the acrobat tent, but narrower. He stops to read the sign over the door. The Cloud Maze, an excursion in dimension, a climb through the firmament. There is no beginning, there is no end. Enter where you please, leave when you wish. Have no fear of falling. Inside, the tent is dark-walled with an immense iridescent white structure in the center. Bailey can think of nothing else to call it. It takes up the entirety of the tent, save for a raised path along the perimeter, a winding loop that begins at the tent entrance and circles around. The floor beyond the path is covered with white spheres, thousands of them piled like soap bubbles. The tower itself is a series of platforms swooping in odd diaphanous shapes, quite similar to clouds. They are layered like a cake. From what Bailey can see, the space between layers varies from room enough to walk straight through to barely enough to crawl. Here and there, parts of it almost float away from the central tower, drifting off into space. And everywhere there are people climbing. hanging on edges, walking through paths, climbing higher or lower. Some platforms move with the weight, others seem strong and sturdy. The whole of it moves constantly, a light movement like breathing. Why is it called a maze? Bailey asks. You'll see, Widget says. They walk along the path and it sways gently like a dock on water. Bailey struggles to keep his balance while he looks up. Some platforms are suspended from ropes or chains from above. On lower levels, there are large poles driven through multiple platforms, though Bailey cannot tell if they reach all the way to the top. In some places, there are swoops of netting, in others, ropes hang like ribbons. They stop on the far side, where the path swings close enough to jump onto one of the lower platforms. Bailey picks up one of the white spheres. It is lighter than it looks, and kitten soft. Across the tent, people toss them at each other like snowballs, though instead of breaking, they bounce off of their targets, floating gently down. Bailey tosses the one in his hand back and follows Poppet and Widget. As soon as they have walked a few paces into the structure, Bailey can see why it is called a maze. He had expected walls and turns and dead ends, but this is different. Platforms hang at all levels, some low by his knees or his waist, others stretch high above his head, overlapping in irregular patterns. It is a maze that goes up and down as well as side to side. See you later, Widget says, hopping onto a nearby platform and climbing into the one above it. Widge always goes straight to the very top, Poppet says. He knows all the fastest routes to get there. Bailey and Poppet take a more leisurely route, choosing platforms to climb at random, crawling up bits of white netting and maneuvering carefully through narrow passages. Bailey cannot tell where the edges are or how high they've climbed, but he is relieved that Poppet seems much less troubled than she had on the Stargazer as she laughs, helping him through the more difficult turns. How do we get down? Bailey asks eventually, wondering how they will ever find their way back. The easiest way is to jump, Poppet says. She pulls him over to a hidden turn that reveals the edge of a platform. They are much higher than Bailey had suspected, even though they have not reached the top. It's okay, Poppet says. It's safe. This is impossible, Bailey says, peering out over the ledge. Nothing's impossible, Poppet responds. She smiles at him and jumps, her red hair trailing out behind her as she falls. She disappears into the sea of white spheres below, enveloped completely before popping back up, her hair a shock of red against the white as she waves at him. Bailey only hesitates for a moment, and he resists the urge to close his eyes as he leaps. Instead, he laughs as he tumbles through the air. Reaching the pool of spheres below is truly like falling into a cloud, soft and light and comforting. When Bailey climbs out, Poppet and Widget are both waiting on the path nearby. Poppet sitting on the edge with her legs dangling over the side. We should be getting back, Widget says, pulling a watch from his pocket. We have to get the kittens ready for another show, and it's nearly midnight. Is it really? Bailey asks. I didn't know it was that late. I should have been home by now. Let us walk you to the gates, Bailey, please, Poppet asks. There's something I want to get for you. They walk together back along the winding path, making their way across the courtyard toward the gates. Poppet takes Bailey's hand to pull him through the curtained tunnel, navigating the dark turns effortlessly. The field visible beyond the gates when they reach the other side is not crowded at this late hour, though a few scattered patrons coming or going linger nearby. Wait here, Poppet says. I'll be right back. She runs off in the direction of the ticket booth, while Bailey watches the clock tick closer to 12. Within moments, Poppet is back, something silver in her hand. Oh, brilliant idea, Pet, Widget says as he sees it. Bailey looks back and forth at them, confused. It is a silver piece of paper about the size of his ticket. Poppet hands it to him. It's a special pass, she explains, for important guests, so you don't have to pay every time you come to the circus. You show it at the booth and they let you in. Bailey stares at it wide-eyed. This card entitles the holder to unlimited admission, is printed on the side in black ink, and on the reverse it reads, Les Cirque des Rêves, and in smaller letters beneath that, Chandrash Christophe Lefauve, proprietor. Bailey is dumbstruck, staring at the shiny silver card. I thought you might like it, Poppet says, sounding unnerved by his lack of articulate response. That is, if you want to come back while we're here. It's wonderful, Bailey says, looking up from the card. Thank you very much. You're welcome, Poppet says, smiling. And I told them to tell me and Widget when you arrive, so we'll know when you're here and we can come find you, if that's all right with you. That would be great, Bailey says. Really, thank you. So we'll see you soon then, Widget says, offering his hand. Definitely, Bailey answers as he takes it. I can come back tomorrow night. That would be perfect, Poppet says. As Bailey lets go of Widget's hand, she leans forward and kisses him quickly on the cheek, and Bailey can feel his cheeks flush. Have a good night, she adds as she pulls away. You too, Bailey says. Good night. He waves at them before they slip back through the heavy curtain, and once they disappear, he turns to walk home. That is so cute. She kissed him on the cheek, but what did she give to him? Okay, so this is like something really invaluable because now he can come back into the circus whenever he wants to. So he has like unlimited access to the circus, which is pretty cool. It seems a lifetime ago that he walked to the circus, though it was only a few hours. And more than that, it feels as though the Bailey who entered the circus was an entirely different person than the one leaving it now with a silver ticket in his pocket. He wonders which is the real Bailey, for certainly the Bailey who spent hours in trees alone is not the Bailey who is granted special admission to a spectacular circus, who makes friends with such interesting people without even trying. By the time he reaches the farm, he is sure that the Bailey he is now is closer to the Bailey he is supposed to be than the Bailey he had been the day before. He may not be certain what any of it means, but for now he does not think that it matters much. In his dreams, he is a knight on horseback, carrying a silver sword, and it does not really seem that strange after all. Okay, so his experience at the circus with Poppet and Widget has like kind of changed his outlook on like life, and now he doesn't really understand his future, but he's okay with it because he finally feels happy for once. That was a long chapter. We have one more to go in this set before your next packet is due. So I'll be reading the tete-a-tete chapter probably tomorrow. So I hope you guys enjoyed that.